Meeting to order. Roll, please.
Anderson.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Miles.
Here.
Randall.
Here.
And Espinoza and Kutil are absent with notice.
Thank you. Look for a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion and second to approve tonight's agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Look for a motion to approve minutes of the January 28, 2025 meeting.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
The motion and second to approve the minutes of the January 28, 2025 meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Public comments. Do we have anyone from the public who wants to comment on anything that's not on the agenda? All right. That took us a whole minute, so we've got a little time to hear from Mr. Clarke.
Okay, residential 13, single-family home permits are open. Commercial, the school was still working, the architect has sent the school the guardrail and handrail redesign, they just have to fund it. So, but it's good they have to do that. So, parking storage, we just down to a couple of pre-final items on that. Max storage, Max shops are all the rail framing have been done. So that's a big accomplishment. Car wash is still moving forward with, CMU block walls and that type of thing. Pro framing building up on North Oaks is moving along. And then we just got 2 new commercial projects in the last 24 to 48 hours, so they haven't kind of gone through those yet. So we'll add those to our list. So commercial's moving forward.
Can you tell us where those commercials are?
Rood Trail and North Oaks.
Yep.
Rood Trail and where?
North Oaks.
North Oaks, okay. Cool. Got a little bit more time, Mr. Christensen, what have you got for us?
I see you got my January and February reports, but kind of summarize them. I had violations for pet licenses again, animal at large, unsightly trash and junk, inoperable vehicles, and then we had a brief spell, so I had some snow and sidewalk violations.
Like you spend a little time in the trailer park.
Yeah.
I did an initial walkthrough, kind of talking with the park manager. I'm not going to really address anything exterior besides your inoperable vehicles. It's like your construction-related siding, roofing. I'm not going to really address those until it gets warmer out, closer to spring, summer.
Sure. Any questions for Mr. Christensen? And we have Teresa's report in the packet, and we're at 7:05, so we'll move into our public hearing on the design standard variance for parcel 99874, Nielson Development. Who from staff is going to give us our briefing?
All right. Good evening. This is, as you can, as noted in the report, is from the Nielson Development. They've come previously for those higher density residential lots. But this variance request is for 2 things: the water main, the dead water main length, as well as the cul-de-sac length. I'll start with the cul-de-sac length. Design standards, as they are currently written, limit the cul-de-sac length at 500 feet from the intersection to the beginning of the bowl. Nielsen's request is to have a variance to that for 550 feet. One thing to note is that the preliminary plan submitted to the city back in a while ago for the Western Meadows did have this cul-de-sac designed at approximately 604 feet. They have backed that off as a compromise with the design standards. Rationale for that is on cul-de-sacs, typically you don't want to have the end of the cul-de-sac hidden, so that you don't have a lot of traffic unintentionally heading down the street, turning around and coming back The intention is really to limit traffic on the cul-de-sac since they're not a through road. And the second portion of the variance request is for the water main. Similarly, water main dead end lengths are limited to 500 feet for the design standards. They are requesting that that be extended to the end of the cul-de-sac, so they are tied in that manner. Reasoning for the limitation on the water main length is water quality. Typically at dead ends you do get some stagnant water, and you always want to have a secondary source too. So like we see up in Maple Pass, that development that's on a dead end currently is planned to be looped in the future, but they actually have to have a booster pump as well for some of the pressures. So the goal of the city is to limit the dead end mains as much as possible, but understanding that, in cul-de-sac situations that typically is difficult to avoid. Also in there is our response letter to the variance, which just been taking excerpts from, which goes into more detail on some of our analysis of the variance request. I'm happy to answer any questions you have on it. Design standards, whatever it may be.
So I know our design standard is 500. Where does that number come from? What makes 500 significant? Why not 600? Why not 1,000? What's with 500?
So going back, looking at just the cul-de-sac and disregarding the water main at this time, it's really trying to limit traffic on that cul-de-sac. So longer it is, the more properties you have along it, more people driving in and out. A lot of the ADJOURNMENT guidelines, which is the Highway Safety and Traffic Operations Manual that is been adopted nationwide, try to limit daily trips on cul-de-sacs to 200 vehicles a day or so, or less. So as you get longer, the number of trips generated goes up, and then cul-de-sac just, it becomes too busy for the type of neighborhood that, it's trying to become.
Did I hear you saying, Tony, that there are more than 2 that are already longer than that?
Yes, Diamond Trail I measured out at over 600. When did Diamond Trail go in, Craig?
It had been leased probably 10 to 15 years ago, because it was in, and then we redesigned Diamond Trail afterwards, so it had been redone. It's probably been 15 years since it's been.
And then over in Kelly Point, Patrick is over 600 feet. And
Aaron
Circle is 500, it's over 500 feet. Those two are long cul-de-sacs.
I was gonna say, I thought those were longer. It seemed like longer than 500 anyway.
When I look at this property, and just from an outside view, and I look at the property and say, how are you gonna use the property? The problem as the guy looking at the ground is you've got a drainage area on the backside that diagonals across there. So the rest of Opal, the backyards on the rest of Opal are backed up against the drainage. But you've got basically a triangle shape in there that they're trying to get back into without excessive cost of trying to bridge. Try to take a street across that drainage and have them bridge that drainage is gonna be an excessive cost. So, I think I look at this and go, I understand reasons for the cul-de-sac length rule there, but to make the best use of the land that we have, an extra 50 feet is, 50 feet is one house.
Right.
Basically one lot on either side of the street. So if you look at traffic, what do we have for trips out of 2 extra houses? 4 or 5 trips a day maybe, at the most, in and out. I don't think adding a house on either side of that street adds an excessive amount of traffic to that street, but it allows the best use of the land to be able to extend that cul-de-sac back in and use the land until you get to the drainage. So myself, I look at it and say, we've got a couple that are longer, 100 feet longer than
Yep.
what this is being proposed at.
As far as the main, it's
the length doesn't bother
I was
us.
gonna say, it's plowing and that kind of stuff doesn't bother you at all, does it, Greg?
The water main is definitely something I would like to see in there, that loop, because the developer on this here actually owns his land to the west.
Right.
This point, and this would be one of our main loops, loop that whole development in over there, so. Or one of the ways we could get it in right now, otherwise it's gonna be tough to put a loop in later.
You want to step up so we can visit a little bit about things? Let Karen know your name and such, because she may not know.
Kelly Nielson, Nielson Construction. And, yeah, you brought up the water main, I don't know where we left off on that, but I guess I was to understanding that we were going to be required to loop that. But maybe I misunderstood.
Well,
I don't know if it was required or if it was a high recommendation.
Yeah, I think, when I was, so I'm aware of the loop, and I just assumed that that was going to be a requirement, or maybe like the give take of trying to figure out how to make this a win.
well, Craig,
So we'd have to extend that over when and if we have that developed.
right, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you guys are, what you're asking is not to loop the cul-de-sac itself, but to extend the main down through, across that drainage and up the other side.
You would
so you can
actually,
hook on.
you'd get an easement from those two properties,
Right.
there, so it'd be 20 foot or 30 foot, whatever we need in there for, depends on the depth of it. But yeah, it's not, as far as the cul-de-sac itself, the street, we're fine with. As far as maintenance issue and that stuff, like I said, that water main would be stubbed out past the property there, so that when the future development happens, they can take it across that drainage in through probably another easement, to get to the main streets and main line again.
We're aware of that, like I said, I kind of, maybe not knowing all the details, I thought that was kind of required at this point, so we're fine with that.
It's not an issue of,
I mean, it's obviously a little more costly, you lose a little bit, but you gotta function too, so it's what it is. And then, yeah, just, Ricky kind of announced at the beginning, originally when they bought that from Costello, we didn't even think about that, they had already kind of had a layout of the whole thing. We added some lots, but we didn't lengthen that until we weren't aware, didn't even look at the 500 versus the 604 or whatever is that, until it got submitted, so. It's a little bit of a surprise, and we thought if we cut one amount out on each side, it would be kind of our way of asking for a little bit.
the Costello preliminary plan, did that have that cul-de-sac drawn on it?
Yeah.
And what was the length on their preliminary plan? Do we know?
I think it was similar to what this is, maybe a little longer, but their preliminary plans came in way before we changed the design standards for them.
It's got to 07 or something.
Yeah, they've been out there for quite a while.
I know
think it
those-
was 604 is what it was, and I was like, well, I talked to Sandy, who works with me, and I said, well, let's not ask for it all, let's try to do a compromise.
Yeah, I was just trying to check when, if it was on the plan number one, I know that plan was approved a long time
Yeah,
ago.
it was.
Most of us were on the board
A
then.
little long before some of us even lived in town.
Okay.
And there's, in the design standard updates, there's been a number of those things that have been changed. It's like storm sewer inlets used to be 1,000 feet between inlets, and we dropped it to 500, if I remember right.
We are at 500 now.
Because, we have situations where we've got some drainage issues. Root Trail is one of them. There's no storm sewer underneath Root Trail.
Right.
But it's like 998 feet to meet over here, so everything has to go down to the corner of Root and Diamond and enter those 3 box culverts. That gets a little interesting once in a while.
Luckily, it's been running.
Luckily, it hasn't.
Design standards have changed forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're just constantly changing.
I mean, I think it's the best use of space. I mean, Angie and I just walked last night, and I was talking to her about it, because I knew you guys were coming, and, I mean, whatever we can do to use up as much of that space as possible, I feel like it should be a no-brainer for us, in my eyes. As long as we can extend that water main, and you said you kind of assumed that was happening anyway.
That's right, we do.
This is a variance request.
It's a variance to our design standards, which,
Not the same as a variance.
correct. A zoning variance has the list of about 15 reasons that you have to have one of those reasons.
Right.
On a design standard, it's just, is something not making sense or not working here, that we can change that.
Minor stuff.
Minor stuff.
We needed to go into a variance meeting
Yep,
versus.
no.
No. Okay.
No, but if you have it in here, I mean, it's, they say the variance on the zoning is that whole page.
Yep. Right.
Out of the design standards, it's just, they need to adhere with it all possible. If they can't do it, they notify the city engineer, they look and come and ask us for a variance, and if it's required, they come to us and say, want a variance. So, process has been done. They talked with engineering, they talked with city staff, put together a plan, came to us and said, here's a plan, will you guys give us a variance?
Okay, so let me throw out another what if. Can we change the design standard to, say, 600?
The design standards can always be changed.
Right, so why issue a variance? Why not just, I mean, we've already got 3 that are outside of this, so.
Because the other ones were done prior to the change.
Oh, I understand, I understand.
Because unfortunately, I mean, we can go pick, well, we can change it, we could change the design standard, but what's the right number?
Right.
So let's say we change the design standard to 600 feet, and then somebody needs 620 feet to make sense of it, we're still issuing a variance.
No, I understand that.
So, I mean, I think you leave the design standard where it is, it's probably
Then why
it's a number that was picked out and said this is what,
This is kind of.
nationally, this is what's normally done.
This is kind of unique, ask,
Yeah.
for variance because of the land behind it.
And the other reason I'm gonna say, Jim, is right now in this town, we have 8 cul-de-sacs
Yeah,
total.
yeah.
So when's the next time that we have a development that comes in and is over the 500 feet for the cul-de-sac?
Well, I remember a meeting years ago where somebody said that we'll never have another cul-de-sac in this town.
I tried to outlaw and get them out of there.
Years and years
I can't remember
ago.
what his name was.
You just give up, Craig? And you know what? He's only got 8 of them to mess with, so I don't feel too bad for him.
It could be Sioux Falls.
Why even have a design standard then?
Yeah.
No, I'm serious, why have a number?
Because we have to have something.
Yeah.
We have to have something for those guys, when they look at a plan to say, yes, this works, or no, it doesn't work, and here's why.
Correct.
Otherwise,
Gotta have some guidance, something to go
Some
off.
guidance, because then if in our judgment review, and we feel it's not right or something should be changed, but then, developer challenges it, then you may get a lot more of these items coming your way to review. So, and I will say the 500-foot is very typical across the Sioux area, the Sioux Falls area. So it's not anything excessively restrictive that this part is requiring.
So like, if it was like a bare cornfield, and we know the design standards going into it, that's where the 500 comes into play. Our engineers would say, hey, max is 500, we'd stop. This is just a unique piece that kind of got pinched on. Costello didn't do it intentionally, because what they had was approved at one time, but years and years later, when they couldn't get it sold, as single family or the lots, they had to sell it as is, so it's kind of unique. Like on that backside, now we know, because we're gonna have to have a cul-de-sac somewhere in that mess too, it's gonna get a little bit tricky and make this tough, unfortunately for you. It's another one, Big Ten or.
We wouldn't even be talking about cul-de-sacs if the drainage dish wasn't there, so it doesn't really matter.
So I think that's why you still gotta have a middle guy, whoever develops in the future.
Yeah.
to do the right thing.
I make a motion to approve it with, as is. as
With the water main.
With the water main and the 550.
That's being requested. The variances is requested.
That's right.
Okay?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the design standard variance for parcel 99874 as requested. Any further discussion? We'll vote. Miles?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Graham?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Randall? Yes. We have no old business. We'll move into the new business, which is also requested in the same parcel 99874. And what this basically, we talked about this earlier, at one of the other meetings, there's a buffer strip that goes along Root Trail, separates Root Trail from this development. Teresa did the research on it. It was never a requirement in the design standard or anything else. It was a recommendation that they made to Costello's that said, you probably want to have a buffer strip in here because you've got light industrial next to residential. But there's no real requirement for that to have been there. And my visit with her was, if we're in agreement that doesn't need to exist, that all we have to have is just a motion here to say, you're allowed to do that. Again, I'll make my comment, and that is if the developer thinks he can sell lots where the houses butt up to light industrial, who are we to say you gotta put 50 or 60 feet of grass in there? And what does 50 or 60 feet of grass do to really buffer that?
Unless you have a fence, not much.
Exactly.
And even then, it's still gonna be.
Yeah,
it
you
could be
who
bad.
lives next to multifamily housing knows that.
Right.
Well, somebody has to mow that grass.
Huh?
Somebody has to mow that grass.
Isn't that even if that buffer strip, isn't that part of the
This will be part of the
homeowner?
property owners on this here chunk here, where they do have some pieces that, in the next block down, they've got a section that Costello still owns. It's that buffer strip that they're trying to sell to the neighbor right there.
Right, but then if we take out this buffer strip, their property will go all the way to Root Trail, right? So they're in charge of all of it.
A lot of the buffer strips got put in when you had a commercial coming up to residential.
Right.
Then they were, had to put a buffer strip in. Where this was kind of just added because they knew there was going to be commercial and residential together, but now that, now it's pretty much residential house here and.
And keep in mind that same requirement for buffer strip was down the street where the two new houses that have been sold are. And it was the city council, there were about 4 things that Costello came in that wanted to change on that preliminary plan then. And they came to the council and took care of all of those things, but the council didn't come through us. So we can recommend, I think what we have to do is we have to recommend to the council that they approve getting rid of the buffer strip. I think it still has to go to the council, but Teresa wanted to bring it through us first.
I don't have any concerns about that.
What'd you say, Mark?
I don't have any concerns about it.
I don't either.
So,
Again, it's gonna make those lots that much bigger,
right.
20 feet, whatever.
So I do,
Who's maintaining what, and, right.
I do want to ask, make sure that we're all straight on this, because in Teresa's report, possible action is allow the landscape buffer reduction to 40 feet as requested. Do not allow or make any amendments to landscape buffer as we see fit. But your lots are going to go all the way to the street, so there's not going to be developer-owned property between their lot and the street, correct?
They were going to be on, once you get halfway down the cul-de-sac where the road makes the turn.
Yes, because there's still, is that still Costello owns that little, it'd be the little piece in between the new storage units
I think
and your
that's
development?
so- I think it's sold, I think it's one of the properties in there.
Okay,
But, yeah, when we bought and when we develop, the property owners that we eventually build and sell to, they'll take care of all maintenance up to the property line along that whole south border. I think the reason that we're asking for that request is that we try to move that street over a little bit so that the length of the yards would be the same, a little more similar on the north side of the cul-de-sac as well as the south side. Because it was really lopsided.
Right.
So once we move that over a little bit, then the distance with your house offset 25 feet, then you build your house. We're concerned that the house build might get a little too close or into that buffer. So that's why we're asking for the variance. And then, but either way, the homeowner will still take care of all of it. The buffer is really unique, because normally the buffer is put on the hardship of the commercial contractor, not the neighbor.
right.
Like if you build a commercial building, you have a 40-foot buffer, but that should be on the property of the commercial building typically, so how this evolved is just unique in general.
I think there was a little give and take there because economic development of the city was pushing on Costello to put that light development in.
Gotcha.
they wanted to do all residential through the whole thing, and they said, we need some light commercial in here, so we'll put it over on the residential side and call it good for now. Is that, Craig, you were probably around for that, wasn't it? You think more than anything was the buffer got put on the other side of the street so they could do their light commercial?
Yeah, get a little bit bigger light, a little bit bigger lots. Like you were saying too, I mean, if that person wants to buy that lot and there's no buffer there, he could put his own buffer in.
Right.
I mean, if he doesn't like the looks of the buildings next to it, he can put some fencing in or shrubbery in or whatever, so.
Any other thoughts, discussion?
No. Need a motion again?
Yep.
I'll make a motion to allow the landscape buffer reduction to 40 feet as requested.
I'll second it.
Have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? We shall vote. Anderson.
Yes.
Graham.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yep.
Miles.
Yep.
Randall, yes. Well, these two chairs are usually in charge, so it's your turn now, Jackson.
Hold on. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Yes.
I have one question.
Sure.
Fire away.
I'm Blaine Vermont, I live on Opal Lane,
Uh-huh.
Variance house. Is there any plans to put a drainage pipe on the street? Because right now the water just runs off the road, and it's like a river going down the street.
So, you remember when I made the comment about used to be 1,000 feet for storm sewers? Well, that's part of that whole problem with that old design, because that street can come down and then it can dump into the gutter, but then it can go all the way around the corner and all the way down without having to have a storm sewer. So, I don't, the problem you're gonna have, that we have there now is this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, the nearest storm sewer is the corner of Diamond and Opal. Or Rood, I mean.
Diamond and Rood,
Diamond and Rood is the closest storm sewer we have.
until you get all the way down to the south end of Opal, or the north end of Opal, at the far north end, you got some storm sewer.
I think with our street design, don't we have to suck a little bit of that in?
Yeah, you created a little point in that.
Yeah,
mid-block,
we
so-
take a little bit with the way that ours is gonna be designed in that cul-de-sac, it's gonna kinda come down and then go back up, and there's an inlet there, so.
Should be,
We should help a little bit, I think, with this,
That
not
would
going
be-
it real well, but I think the design of it should soften it up a little bit.
Yeah, right now, it's washing all the gravel down from that section.
Right.
But we have that little bit of a give.
Because you'll have to design this next portion of Opal,
Right.
and they'll look at the studies and that stuff and see what they think about that. They'll have to prove to make sure, who the water's
I mean, I think
going.
they've cut it that far
So we
already,
should be able
there's
to
been
make it
some
help.
communication where that's gotta, so some of that water will come off of that and drain a little bit west, hit our inlets and then dump out behind. So I hope, I do think it should help some, I don't know exactly where your house is, but it should help.
So, your new street cul-de-sac in there, that'll have an inlet on it, a storm sewer inlet?
And it actually is off, what's set a little bit west into like the first or second lot, I
Yep.
believe.
So there's a little bit from the industrial area to the south, trail that'll drain on
Okay, and
the,
I looked at that part of the design, but yeah,
on the west side of the road, it'll capture some of it as it rounds the corner to the cul-de-sac, to the low point. But on the, call it east side of the road, that'll probably still carry through.
but in that intersection of Opal and Rood, if we've got an inlet somewhere in that area, it's gonna help what you're talking about out dramatically.
I think it will soften that up.
Yes, but
It
there's.
should.
Yeah.
Because right now, the way that designs everything coming from basically the center of the loop on Rood Trail, both sides come down, and when they get to Opal, there's a valley in the street at Opal, and it sends it your way. Where if you have an inlet that's gonna be right at that intersection, it should grab a whole bunch of that water and get rid of it before it gets down to you guys.
It's not, I don't think it's at the intersection,
No,
it's
it's
not
not.
clear, but
It's
it's.
the
down the
mid-block of the
cul-de-sac.
cul-de-sac.
What's that?
It's at the mid-block of the proposed cul-de-sac.
Okay.
So it's not at the intersection of the New Street and Opal.
But the water that comes around to the north end of Route should make the corner stay to the west of Opal. And
Then go down the cul-de-sac and
then
get
run
into
down the
that.
cul-de-sac to get to the inlets.
Okay.
So-
We still got somewhere where that water is probably gonna go and
There's
get
still
into
gonna
it.
be some that's going down there, but not as much.
Okay, that's good. I'm gonna hope that's gonna help your problem there, because I'm well aware of it.
Well, I was thinking something in the future, if we have a huge downpour or something.
We've got a longer street than you that doesn't have one on it. Sagehorn, there's nothing anywhere in Sagehorn until you get around the corner on the north side, but anyway, appreciate you bringing that up. We do have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.
Yeah. Well, I'm lucky because I'm at the bottom of the road.